And I want to acknowledge and thank the piece which actually tells us some of the actions that we need to take going forward. I am glad to be part of this, and I want to say that it is an opportunity to share with the rest of the world the strategic step Africa is taking towards meeting the aspirations of the African Union's Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals. Actually, it's interesting because we have information, and I remember that Ambassador Monte was the one who called attention to this, that if you transpose Agenda 2030 and Africa's Agenda 2063, and you look at the various things that we're trying to do, 9% parity, that is, they speak the same things, so that in point of fact we don't have to create new platforms to achieve 2030 and 2063 eventually. So I think that tells you that we do have a policy framework that enables us to go forward. Maybe it is important to state that the Sustainable Development Goals was actually created by an African group here in New York. Most of the work was done by Africans in different places. The President of the General Assembly was an African, and we had an African permanent rep who was very active doing the work, and we also had our current DSG who was also very active in making sure that we got it. So it is not surprising that it reflects and continues to talk to an African agenda. We'll agree that Africa's greatest resources is people, and since over 60% of Africa's people are 24 years of age or younger, there's an urgent need to pay special attention to our young people. It is for this reason that African head of states and government have directed the African Union, devoted the African Union theme for 2017 to harnessing the demographic dividend through investments in youth. And let me talk about investment, because I heard very clearly the president or the chair of the African group talking about investments, and those investments have increased. But one thing that we have to all ensure is accountability for investments. You see, if you put money in education, in health, or in job creation, or in what Francine talked about, which was about the youth funds which countries are creating, we must make sure that they actually serve the purpose for which they're there for. So teachers must go to school, doctors must do their work, nurses must be there doing their work. You can actually put money in services and not get the results you're looking for. So accountability is a big issue that all of us must continue to insist upon. We at UNFPA were convinced that only when every young person is enabled to fulfill his or her full potential that we will truly make strides towards sustainable development. That's why we enthusiastically responded to the call of the African heads of states and government to work with the African Union Commission and other key partners and stakeholders in developing the African Union roadmap for the demographic dividend. Countries and regional economic communities are exploring how best to align their respective development plans with the demographic dividend agenda, and UNFPA is proud to support efforts now and in the future. We joined the African Union, the ECA, and the African Development Bank on the generation of the 2017 Gender Scorecard for Africa, which this year is scoring countries on those aspects of gender equality that are most crucial for achieving a demographic dividend. This speaks to the heart of the mandate of UNFPA. Progress on the demographic dividend would depend crucially on the extent to which women and girls are able to exercise their human rights, including choosing when and who to marry, when and whether to have children, being free of violence, abuse, and exploitation, and being able to secure quality education and contribute to politics and the economy of their communities. The EU Gender Scorecard of 2017 will help us to see where women and girls are falling behind and where we need to defend their rights and expand their freedoms and opportunities. Across the world, young women and men are calling for urgent responses to the challenges of unemployment. They are asking their governments to provide the health services and information, quality education, and skills development needed for a 21st century economy. This is essential for their own well-being and a critical foundation for the health and prosperity of their families, communities, and nations. Through modern media and the internet, young people today see what is possible and are more aware when their rights are denied, and they are rightly called for a greater role in the design of strategies affecting their welfare. So they want to be there when you are talking about them. So nothing is done about them without them. The 4 pillars of the African Union Roadmap speak clearly to the 3 critical areas of national development. And to advance in these areas, government must identify shortfalls at national and subnational level and invest accordingly. One of the things that we find as we work in many countries is that except you go down to subnational level, you don't make change happen. So it is possible for you to actually talk to governments and to advocate with governments to have policies. The policies don't work for themselves. What actually happens is programs and programs at community and subnational level. That's where action is, and that's where we all must go. We at UNFPA, we're working with governments across continent on such studies, diagnosing, for example, where child marriage is highest, where HIV still plagues young people's prospects, where family planning is out of reach, and where youth unemployment is most severe. We can only know about them when we go to the level of communities. That's when we can get the facts we know we want. Our forthcoming demographic dividend atlas for Africa profiles all the countries on the continent and provides a basis for governments to plan investments and track progress. We are also supporting countries to analyze current economic trajectories and the consequences of inaction. More than 34 countries have undertaken national studies and are convening stakeholders, mobilizing the partnerships with the UN, the development banks, and the private sector for country-level engagement for demographic dividend. This speaks to the Addis Ababa action agenda, because in implementing the Agenda 2030 and indeed ultimately 2063, it has to be a whole society approach. It cannot be government alone. The resources that are required cannot come from government alone. So this is critical work, and we must center this on the human rights of our young people, and we at UNFPA are happy to contribute. Finally, our work on the demographic dividend is not a one-year event. even though 2017 is set aside for this. We believe that this is something that will form the basis of a long-term investment and activity and program on the ground to reach every young person going forward. So the success of our shared efforts in 2017 will be measured by national development plans for the coming decades through 2030 and 2063. And we also are the agency that provides censuses for countries to enable them measure and have precision about how they reach people with disaggregated data and geography. We remain committed to this important agenda and we look forward to the outcome of this forum.
Thank you.
I thank you.
D'ouverture. Dans les segments qui vont suivre, nous allons essayer d'appeler les